Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for October 13, 2024. We are recording this on October 14, and 391 days have passed since the September 2023 war, resulting in the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh. As we record this, dozens of Armenians continue to be held as hostages and POWs in Azerbaijani prisons, and the world, including the government in Armenia, is largely indifferent to their plight. Today we're talking with Ambassador Dziunik Aghajanian. Welcome back, Dziunik.
Thank you.
Always great to talk with you.
For me too.
Ողջույն, Dziunik.
Ողջույն.
Let's begin with yet another round of threats from Azerbaijan. The Azerbaijani Ministry of Defense held an official meeting involving major divisions and leadership of their armed forces. The messages communicated through their announcement was to be ready to take preventive measures against all possible provocations of revanchist forces on the conditional border, and I'm quoting, that Azerbaijan is building up and getting ready for some kind of provocation is beyond doubt. But experts we've talked to say that Azerbaijan would not go for such a move preceding or during COP29, which is planned to be held in November 11 to 22, to be precise, due to reputational concerns. While threats from Azerbaijan may appear to be a regular occurrence, we know that such high-profile meetings and announcements have in the past coincided with major periods of escalation in the Armenia-Azerbaijan war. And indeed, we are still at war. Many don't realize. So, for instance, right before the 44-day war in 2020, and also before the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh in September 2023, such meetings were held and such statements were issued. So I want to ask, to begin with, what is the purpose of Azerbaijan's escalation of tensions right now? Seemingly, they would want less tensions as they're getting ready for COP29.
We cannot discard anything. And as you rightfully mentioned, having big conferences or big meetings coming never stop Azerbaijan from fulfilling their dreams and ideas through aggressive military actions. And we have seen that through both lengthy war operations and also short ones, like in 22 in September and also in 23 by ethnic cleansing in Artsakh. I think there are two issues to be considered. First, apparently they never start military actions without the green light or the go-ahead from their bosses. And their bosses are at different levels, starting from Turkey and going higher up to Western decision-making centers, and among them the US. So apparently, given the current situation and the result of the latest visit to New York and the trilateral meeting, Azerbaijan is simply using its military rhetoric to increase pressure over Armenia, given the fact that the US is very eager to get something signed. And through that, it is ready to pressurize the Armenian government for more and more concessions in order to satisfy the Azerbaijani demands and bring them to the signing table. Meantime, I think they are using this increased military rhetoric also to kind of increase the threat level in the Armenian public, to make sure that the Armenian public won't stand against the possible concessions that will be coming as a result of this very interesting spiral game that they are playing over and over again. So this is the whole situation. I wouldn't discard anything happening now, and I wouldn't discard military actions after COP29. So COP29 will be just in between these possible situations, and everything depends on both larger geopolitical situation and, as I said, the green light that will be given to it for starting these kind of actions.
Okay, how about attendance from Armenia? Would you support the Armenian government being present if it meant that we could get some concessions on the hostages or the POWs?
Well, hostages and POWs are a totally different issue than the main issue of the COP29. Of course, as any other country, Armenia is also invited to the meeting. And if we decide to participate, I have suggested long time ago that it should be very low level delegation from the specialized ministry that will be there to make sure that any document being adopted does not contain any language that will be against Armenia. So simply for this purpose, I don't think Azerbaijan will give in and release any hostages, and I don't think that. And they have shown it several times, because when Armenia agreed to withdraw its candidacy for this COP29, they had agreed, and the US was the mediating partner there, that all hostages and POWs will be released. And we saw that only 32 of them were released. And later on, we saw a total blockade of Artsakh being implemented in full. So we're used to Azerbaijan playing multiple layer games. And I think even if they release one or two hostages in order to give a show that they are very humanitarian minded country, nobody would believe that, and that will not solve the issue. They have violated November 9 declaration. They have not released all the people that were detained in any way, be it POWs or hostages or any other way, and they have used the hostages and the POWs as bargaining tools for getting the mining maps and other concessions from the Armenian side. So I don't think this has gone anyway. And recently I heard again about the mining maps and other preconditions being put in front of the Armenian side. So I think they are just bringing additional points into the discussion for the purposes of getting as much as possible meantime as they go to COP29, and also gain time in order not to get any sharp reactions from the Western government, and ensure that they will get some high-level representation at COP29 for their own prestige.
And just an aside, for those who don't think that Azerbaijan would really go for ruining its reputation in the middle of major events, I would like to remind you that the blockade of Artsakh happened right during the Junior Eurovision in Yerevan. So nothing is to be excluded. Moving on, about 10 days ago, the Constitutional Court in Armenia published a decision that the Declaration of Independence does not amount to law, and therefore did not present a territorial claim on Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan was quick to rebuff the decision and deemed it unsatisfactory, and continued its demand for Armenia to change its constitution. We've talked about it the previous episode, so we don't want to go too much in detail on this issue, but do you believe that the current round of escalation and threats is related to this decision, or trying to put pressure to change the constitution? Or are there more far-going goals that Azerbaijan has?
Well, I have explained in my previous discussion with you that Azerbaijan is not going to sign any document at any point now, because Azerbaijan has its own commitments, and it is unwilling to go with his commitments, and it is dragging the process by bringing in issues and conditions that would simply win time and avoid doing their part of the game in order for the geopolitical situation to change, and then they will get away from those commitments naturally. So in this particular logic, of course, anything that comes as a decision, and I have to mention that the decision of the Constitutional Court was unlawful in its reference to the Declaration of Independence. Any kind of decision that would for the mediators seemed to open the way for signing the document is actually no use for the Azerbaijani side. And it is not accidental that the decision of the Constitutional Court came the same day and before the trilateral meeting in New York. So it was like a preparation step, something that the Armenian side has guaranteed that it would come up with some kind of a decision that, as you know, the decisions of the Constitutional Court are considered non-negotiable in that sense, and that will solve the issue for their part. But it is not for Azerbaijan in this case to say, yes, I'm satisfied with this decision and I'm going to sign something that will the next minute open up the door for my commitments to start war against Iran by opening up a second front. So this is not going to happen. And this is not the situation, and we will see more and more conditions from that big list of preconditions that Azerbaijan has drawn from all the wishes and wills that it has ever had. And meantime, we will see even possibly the demand for the nuclear power plant to be closed. And you have seen the demand for Armenia to be demilitarized. And the list can go
punishing
on and
of
on.
former presidents, and it goes on and on.
They can claim that you have to discard all your cultural heritage, you have to give up your Christianity, etc., etc. I mean, they can come up with any demand as long as we have this kind of a government in decision-making seats. They can do anything.
It's funny, Dziunik, because you said that they actually timed the decision to coincide with the trilateral meeting in New York.
It happened the same day. In the morning, they released the decision of the Constitutional Court. That's why they rushed into bringing it into the Constitutional Court. And the Constitutional Court, first, they did not need to bring it to the Constitutional Court. That was not the kind of decisions that the Constitutional Court would discuss. And secondly, in the decision of the Constitutional Court, they diverted into the discussion of the Declaration of Independence, which was never the issue in that particular document, legal document that was presented by the government. And they came up with a kind of declarative and descriptive decision and wording, which is not part of the Constitutional Court language. So having it come out the same day in the morning and in the evening, you know, the time difference from Armenia to New York, in the morning they came up with the decision, in the evening there was this trilateral meeting. So it was exactly done to prepare for that meeting so that they can remove this one obstacle as well from the issue of the signing of that so-called peace agreement.
Yeah, so this is about the demarcation and delimitation, and Pashinyan was presenting this demarcation and delimitation plan as Armenia's land deed, essentially in Armenian Kadastri Vikayakan, and every Armenian government official was saying that with the signing of the demarcation and delimitation principles, Azerbaijan would agree to the de facto borders of the Soviet Armenian Republic, and repeatedly brought up this Alma Ata, Alma Ata, Alma Ata. Yet, while the agreement has not even been ratified by Azerbaijan, that government began downplaying even the significance of Alma Ata. The spokesperson of the Azerbaijani MFA, and I'm quoting, said, "The Alma Ata declaration has nothing to do with the question of where the borders of the CIS member states lie and which territories belong to which country." I mean...
And Hovik, let me mention that we have said this so many times on our own podcast.
We're not clairvoyant. Every single Armenian analyst has said this. But despite probably nauseating you, Dziunik, who is right and who is wrong? And does it really matter if Azerbaijan is explicitly saying that Alma Ata decision means nothing in the context of borders?
Well, I know we seem to be very foolish in discussing this issue, I think, for more than a year now. And saying the same thing, but I think anybody who can read the document, they can see that the Alma Ata declaration indeed has nothing to do with the borders. Secondly, there's a protocol to Alma Ata declaration about in which there is a sentence that says, based on the existing borders during the Soviet time. So the existing borders at the time when Armenia signed the protocol and then ratified did not include Artsakh anymore. And the existing borders when Azerbaijan signed and ratified in 1993 also did not include Artsakh and the adjacent areas. So if you read the document, it has nothing to do with the actual borders or the borderline that has to be drawn between the two independent states. Secondly, Armenia has ratified this document with 10 reservations, exactly referring to Artsakh. So the Armenian current government avoid mentioning any of it. Thirdly, I think the very sharp minds in the West have decided to come up with this idea of Alma Ata declaration as if some kind of a legal document that would serve as a basis and that would provide the kind of understanding on which to base the border. Whereas unlike many former Soviet republics, Armenia and Azerbaijan have gone through two delimitation processes, one in 1925 and the second one ended in 1988 and was signed in January of 1988 by the two representatives of the two republics. Recently, a roundtable was organized and Mr. Hrant Bagration, former Prime Minister of Armenia, was detailing all the process that has happened at the time. And more 976 kilometers of the Armenian-Azerbaijani border has been SSR, has been delimited. They didn't have the time to go into demarcation because of the events that followed, but the documents are there. The protocols are there, more than 183 protocols with maps detailing exactly where the border goes from the rivers and the highlands and all the places that are doubtful. The thing is that it is not used to Azerbaijan, and the Armenian government has used the 1975 so-called the General Chief of Staff map, which was the military map used for the deposition of the military units in the Azerbaijan SSR and the Armenian SSR, and it had nothing to do with the actual border that was supposed to be between the two republics. The thing is that that was the only map probably that was available in the Western countries and was probably more or less acceptable to the Azeris because they were supposed to gain some territories from there, like the one that they got in Kiran's area. So this is the thing. The Azeris are not going to agree to any document because they want to get everything. That's their understanding. There has to be no Armenian political entity in this region, and that's their understanding of peace and prosperity in this region. The only way they can agree to any kind of document is through either force or non-existence of the Armenians in this region. This is the zero-sum game that they are playing, and this is the situation we are facing. As for the again playing this, agreeing to Alma Ata declaration in one instance and then withdrawing their agreement, it's a normal thing. We saw that several times happening. The thing is that for the Armenian prime minister and the foreign minister, it has become this kind of the anchor that they are trying to hold in order to show some legitimacy of the process. No, it's not a legitimate process. It's a gimmick. And the border that they think they have delimited, it's not a border. It's just concessions to the Azeris, giving the Armenian land to its enemy.
So last weekend, On October 7 and 8, both Pashinyan and Aliyev were in Moscow for the Commonwealth of Independent States, the CIS summit. Both of them met with Putin separately, and official Russian state media shared some unflattering images of Pashinyan, including an image where Aliyev and Lukashenko look like they're having a serious discussion while Pashinyan in the background is struggling with his espresso cup. And then there was another image where Pashinyan's looking down right next to an Azerbaijani flag. Frankly, to me, it looked like he was looking at his zipper or trying to fix it or something. Upon his return, Pashinyan's office announced that the Russian border guards would withdraw from their duties on the Armenian-Iranian border, and Armenia's border guard service would assume that responsibility. Additionally, it was mentioned that Armenia would begin to participate in the border guard duties with Russia along the Armenian-Turkish border. First of all, Dziunik, what was the Kremlin trying to communicate through its media, and how was the coverage of Pashinyan in general?
You know, any photographer knows that if you are looking for kind of unfitting pictures, you can easily find a posture to do that. But the fact that they shared it and through different media sources, it shows the disrespect that they have and the real understanding of the nature of that person. I'm sure they don't equate him with the Armenian people. Of course, it has shed a shadow over our image, but they know that the Armenians are very respectable and highly regarded people, and this kind of images is just painful to look at, and it depicts the whole situation that we're in now. This kind of giving in position and in a very unfitting way, and also this kind of a actor-like game that they are playing, going and showing some face while doing their own plan and program in order to fulfill their own commitment. You mentioned the withdrawing the Russian border guard from the, I would correct, from the Mehri checkpoint, the Iranian-Armenian border. So the border is still, bilaterally guarded, whereas the checkpoint will be transferred totally to the Armenians. It is not surprise they are going in with their plan of withdrawing the Russian presence from Armenia, and it's done gradually. They are doing it in places where it's easier to fulfill, and then expanding it to other areas. So I think the whole idea of him going to Moscow was getting that agreement. They're showcasing his participation, giving some semblance of some diversion to the improvement of the Armenian-Russian relations. It was just a game being played for the sake of having the meeting with Putin and getting his agreement for the withdrawal of the Russian border guard from the checkpoint. This was the whole idea.
Putin didn't have any problems with it. Of course, he acquiesced to it. But Pashinyan's office was quick to present this as basically a strengthening of our sovereignty and independence. What's he achieving with these requests for the border guard to move? What is the aim of these requests?
Well, it's part of the plan, as I explained, of withdrawing Russians from Armenia. And it has nothing to do with increasing our sovereignty, because they are immediately being replaced with European so-called civilian monitors, which later on will become the NATO force on our border. So it's one transferring Armenia against the people's wills and wishes, from one pocket into another pocket, and the second pocket is not going to provide any security or any well-being to Armenia, and they are promising cold winters, no gas or electricity, and possibly starvation periods, while we're being transferred to, in actuality, total Turkish control and dominance. So his idea of, because he has no other way of getting out of the trap that he himself created for him and his team and the whole Armenian state, he's doing what he's being told. And I think they are thinking that by controlling the Mehri checkpoint, then it will be easier possibly for them to transfer it to
somebody
maybe
in the
Europe,
West.
somebody or some kind of a company from the West to do that. So it's part of also that corridor creating or Western controlled route being created as the first step, having the Armenian border guards only standing there.
You mentioned that this was the primary reason why Pashinyan went to Moscow, but was there anything else on the agenda of the Pashinyan-Putin meeting?
Well, I'm sure they discussed the situation, and I'm sure Putin, in his way, explained the difficulties that Armenia and the Armenian economy will have if they give up the ties to Russia. Possibly also giving the example of both Ukraine and Georgia, showing that the best interest of Armenia is sticking with the existing security structure and also the economic system that we have and is providing really unprecedented income to the Armenian budget. But as I explained, Pashinyan has created and put himself into a Western trap, and he himself and his team can get out of it only if the popular discontent raises to the level that they cannot handle it anymore and just have to resign. So apparently that was the only reason, because the Armenian delegation was there negotiating some documents, one relating to the Eurasian security structure, the second condemning unilateral sanctions. And they participated in deliberations of those documents and at the last minute refused to sign it or to become part of it. So it is the same signature that we saw in 22, when the CSTO, the Collective Security Treaty Organization summit was held in Armenia. They participated in the negotiation of the document relating also to providing CSTO assistance to Armenia and also having military presence on the border with Azerbaijan to ensure that there is no action against Armenia, and Pashinyan refused to sign and then came up with some kind of rhetoric demands towards CSTO. Actually, just yesterday, I was listening to the former chief advisor to the minister, Russian minister who has resigned, and he was telling that in 22, the actions taken by Armenian prime minister was aimed at forcing the Russian party to enter into military action to open a second front against Azerbaijan, which, of course, the Russian side could not afford, and that was coincidental with the attacks from the Ukrainian side that was happening in the Russian-Ukrainian front line. So this was done in combination with the Western plan, because, as you remember, just less than 2 months before those aggressive actions from Azerbaijan, Burns visited Armenia and had meetings with the high-level officials and the prime minister, and apparently discussed in detail the plan that they were going to implement on the Armenian side. The plan has gone nowhere. It is still there. It is being changed according to the situation. They are coming up with creative ways of giving the Armenian territory in an effort to drag Russia into military actions. And that is exactly why Putin is very easily agreeing to this kind of withdrawing from certain positions, because being in those positions would mean that they will be targeted and used as a target for this kind of manipulation and attempts to drag Russians into military actions.
Yeah, as you said, I think Putin tried to paint a rosy picture of Armenian-Russian relations as much as possible and showed how much the economy has grown. And as I think Hovik is going to talk a little bit about the economy and food security maybe a little bit later, and show that the reliance on Russia has only grown significantly.
And also brought benefits to Armenia and the Armenian economy.
Yeah. A trilateral Putin-Pashinyan meeting did not take place reportedly because Pashinyan declined. And we don't really know what was on the agenda of the Putin-Aliyev meeting. But after Pashinyan's meeting to Moscow, various Russian officials made statements relevant to Armenia. For example, Alexei Overchuk stated that Russia must have a key role in the opening of the Armenian-Azerbaijani transportation links. And then both Baku and Moscow expressed renewed concern about the EU mission in Armenia, the EUMA. What's the purpose of the Azerbaijani criticism of the EUMA? What are they trying to achieve with this strategy?
Well, you know that the European monitoring mission in Armenia was supposed to be on both sides of the border, also on the Azerbaijani side as well. And Azerbaijan stopped the implementation of the part that related to the location of these monitors on its own territory. And now it is using the argument that this mission is mostly for surveillance reasons and rather than any other. Firstly, to kind of appease the Russian concerns, and secondly, also they know the real reason why this mission was supposed to be brought to the region. It is the pre-guard of the NATO mission to this region, and they don't want any NATO presence on their territory. They agreed to this plan for the sake of gaining Karabakh and depopulating it. And they don't want any foreign ears or eyes looking at the situation. Moreover, having foot on the ground and using their leverages in order to destabilize Azerbaijan once they are there. So they are not naive people, and they want to get rid of any eyes that could see anything that they don't want them to see, and also to remove them from the region, kind of drawing away the threat that their repositioning as NATO force could mean for the Azerbaijani state and for Aliyev regime.
The Armenian officials have been actually completely complimentary about the EU mission in Armenia. Has it not been beneficial for Armenia? Because at least for the last year, we haven't heard about Armenian soldiers constantly dying on the border and things like that. It's the level of physical tension seems to have gone down.
Well, it only seems. As I explained, that Azerbaijani side starts military action only when they have the green light. And it's not the work of the European monitors that this is happening, because as they have explained on multiple occasions, they provide information to Baku. Mm-hmm. So what is the reason of they are not doing it for Armenia, they are doing it for themselves, and they are collecting information on Russian troops and military presence in Armenia. They are collecting information on Iran and Iranian moves and actions and positioning on the borderline with Armenia, and transferring this information to Brussels and to NATO. So, sorry, I don't believe that they are here for the sake of Armenia, because I have never heard that binoculars can save you from any artillery attack or any action from offensive action if the enemy decides to attack you. We have seen that even the UN peacekeeping mission that has been positioned as a result of UN Security Council resolution, has no security guarantees, and we're seeing it in Lebanon. Who can guarantee, can binoculars guarantee any kind of decision not to attack Armenia, because really European monitors are just walking around the border there?
So it's pretty clear that, similar to New York and with Blinken a couple of weeks ago, nothing was achieved in Moscow and Putin. What would you say about the condition of the talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan? Are we stalled? Are we at an impasse? What's next?
Well, I have explained that there's no negotiations. The trilateral meeting in Russia did not happen because, of course, Armenian side could not. I mean, it did all it could to move the negotiation process from Russian platform into the Western Brussels, Washington platform, and now to come back to the Russian platform, it's impossible for them. So it's natural that they did not agree to any kind of meeting. Besides, if they agreed to the meeting, it would mean that they agreed to Russian monitoring of the route that would connect Azerbaijan to Nakhichevan, and that's not the case. So that's understandable. As for the negotiations, they have stopped being negotiations in 2018 when this government came to power. And we only see one side giving in to the demands of the Azeri-Turkish side upon the Western pressure. So this is the process. So I cannot call it a negotiation.
Dziunik, coming back to Yerevan, I believe last week there was a conference organized by the Civil Contract Party, attended by many dignitaries and even foreign-funded NGOs and so forth, titled Crossroads of Peace. So at that conference, Armen Grigoryan revealed some more information about what was discussed at the April 5 meeting in Brussels between Blinken, von der Leyen, and Pashinyan. Apparently, food security was on the table, no pun intended. In this speech, Grigoryan casually talks about diversifying away from Armenia's reliance on Russian wheat. Of course, he doesn't explicitly mention Russia, I believe, but he says that if we rely too much on wheat, then we can just simply move to rice, as if it's some kind of a top-down command. In the background of remarks from Dan Bayer that Armenia should be prepared to endure some cold winters, this really sent some shivers down my spine when I heard such statements being argued nonchalantly. And for our listeners, I want to, I'm getting this information from a post by a journalist, Sevak Hakopian, but I knew that Armenia was very reliant on many resources, but especially with wheat. Armenia imports 70% of its wheat, so our self-sufficiency is about 30%. Armenia annually received, when we had Artsakh, Armenia annually received about 70,000 tons, which was an additional 12 to 15% of that demand, which we don't have anymore. So with Artsakh, we would have been 45% self-sufficient. But 95% of our foreign dependency, which is 70% overall, is from Russia. So I'm just wondering, how can something so important be talked about so nonchalantly? Are there some magical movements in the market, in the government? Is the government telling everyone to stop buying wheat and start buying rice? Whether it's not foolish or whether it's smart to make such moves, is there any evidence that the government is serious about these, or is it just meant to alienate Russia even more? I'm not sure what to make of this.
Well, they are trying to cut ties that connect us and Russia in all areas. So we hear from the same group of people that we can buy gas from Azerbaijan, and they're lying to the people. They're saying it in a way that would give the you would think that it's kind of the same thing, whether you buy it from there or there. It doesn't matter. Either at the cost or the levels of the consumption won't matter anymore. So they give this kind of understanding when they say these things. But if you buy gas from Azerbaijan, it means you are buying the same Russian gas but now paying more and becoming totally dependent on Azerbaijan. So it's not only economically dependent, but also politically dependent on Azerbaijan. Secondly, the same thing goes with this very easy idea of cutting the supply of wheat and replacing it with rice. Sorry, our diet does not, it includes rice, but the rice is not the main source of our diet. Wheat is the main source of our diet. And most of our food is made of wheat and flour. So, we say Armenians are bread-eating people. This is part of our diet. You cannot replace it. But if you replace it with rice, it means you become totally dependent on other countries. Now
Armenia can't grow rice. I mean, I don't see.
We can't grow. Our nature does not allow us to grow rice. It means we will be totally dependent on.
Where would large supplies of rice come from to start with?
That doesn't matter. But then you import 100% of rice. You don't produce rice. With wheat, you produce certain part of rice, and at some point, Armenia has been sufficient about 70% of the production. So instead of saying, okay, we can do our best to increase the local production, they are just killing agriculture, making the people more dependent on imports on all areas, vegetables, wheat, grains, etc. And then saying, okay, now you can replace it with rice. I'm sorry, we cannot replace it with rice because you cannot do or eat or get the same kind of diet as your body is used based on your nature. Secondly, what does it increase your independence if you are not dependent on Russian supply, but you are dependent on other countries' supply? What difference does it make? The whole world is dependent on each other. They're taking parts of different food products from one country and then other food products from other country. It's a normal trading practice. So it doesn't make you dependent. If you want to become less dependent and become more independent, you have to increase your own production, especially with products that are local to your consumption. This is the way, not just saying we can replace it with this or we can replace it with that. Gas, maybe later on they will say, okay, we will buy this liquid gas from or oil from US. Maybe that is their purpose. I don't understand this kind of policy. It has nothing, no logic, no economic logic. It has only one logic. Just cut all ties with Russia. Who is going to supply oil to us? I mean, the food oil, sunflower oil. That's also part of our main production. There are a lot of food stuff that we get from Russia. Who is going to supply that to us? And what will it cost to our population? 2, 3, 4 times more? The poverty level in Armenia is more than 30%. What are they talking about? It means they are just charting the way for the population to leave the country because the poverty level will increase. The people will look for job opportunities somewhere else, and so it means they are just putting there a plan of depopulation of Armenia and replacing it with Turkish presence, be it from Azerbaijan or Turkey itself. So this is the main idea they have. Turkish control in the region and Turkish presence in Armenia and non-Armenian state in the region. No Armenian identity in the region. This is the whole idea they have, and this is what they're doing.
What's funny is that for all its talk during this Armenian government, Armenia's dependence on Russia has skyrocketed even more in terms of other segments of the economy. Whether it's re-exports, I mean, you can name it different things, but still that's a significant portion of your GDP that is only increasing, which is another reason why I'm just trying to scratch my head saying, what's going on? Is there any sign of diversification of the Armenian economy, or is Armenia sleepwalking into a very, very cold winter, essentially, for years to come?
Well, Armenia is not sleepwalking. Armenian government is sleepwalking and dragging the population with him. So this is the situation. We understand what is going to happen, and it's natural that dependence on Russia will increase because the first thing they do is killing the Armenian economy, the local production. We were providing a lot of vegetables and fruits to Russia. They killed the production, and those markets have been replaced with other producers. If you go and talk to the farmers, they are just crying. They're just crying. They say several years ago we were exporting it to Russia and we were getting a lot of money out of our work in the fields. Now a lot of grape yards have been destroyed because for several years the Armenian companies are not buying the grapes, and those grapes were being exported to Russia. Now these markets have got other suppliers, of course, and the people in the farms cannot do anything. So instead of keeping your own production, increasing your own production, having a kind of equal balance of import and export, so you are reliant on Russia as much as Russia is reliant on you, or in your economy the balance is much more equal. They killed the production in Armenia and thought that they would replace it with Turkish products, but not. They are being replaced with other products and mainly from Russia, because under sanctions, Russia decided to increase its productions, and it has vast opportunities and fields to grow anything they want. So it's natural that will happen. And it's not only that, it's the diamonds, it's the gold, it's, I don't know, you name it, that the re-exporting is bringing money to the economy, but it's not going to the pockets of the ordinary people. It just increases the prices in the country, which is draining the savings of the regular citizens of the country.
Dziunik, we wanted to briefly cover the internal Armenian political movement, the opposition. Specifically, the Srbazan Movement, led by Archbishop Bagrat Galstanyan, has restarted its activity. There were 2 rallies that have been held so far. The latest one, prior to the latest one, we saw that the group led by the Srbazan they went to the prosecutor's office, I believe, and they demanded that a prosecution be initiated against Pashinyan and other members of the government for crimes related to ethnic cleansing of Artsakh. Dziunik, I believe you are supporting the movement, you're participating in the movement. Any thoughts on the movement so far? How close is the movement towards its goal of their stated goal of unseating Pashinyan?
Yeah, it's not very close, but it has done its part of the job in the sense of organizing people around the movement and helping people gradually understand the real intentions of the people sitting in the government and the real state of affairs in the country. As you know, the movement during this kind of pause period, Srbazan was going to different marzis and meeting with different people and explaining them what has happened and how it has happened. The thing is that we have this kind of understanding in our minds that once we have this uprising of a political movement, then it has to come to a result immediately. But that's not going to happen given the whole geopolitical context of this situation. In a usual time, maybe it would have been much more successful by this way of action. But at a time when you have this global plan being played out and decision makers being keen on keeping the people that are implementing their promises and orders, no matter how many people are in the streets, this government is not going to go away. Unless the whole country stands up and stays on its feet for a lengthy period of time, then might be the case. So I think it forced the movement to start reorganization, cleansing its members in a way, getting out those that have simply attached to the movement because it was on a up level, going up the political landscape of Armenia. And now they decided that they have nothing to do with the movement and they moved away. So in that way, we see more, in a way, consolidating thing happening within the movement and around itself. So there is a big group of people, several thousand of them, that they would stand no matter what. And that's the core of the movement. And that's very important because when we see the right moment, then it means these people will be the core around which the others will gather and probably get to the result. But as you see, the process is not easy. The political landscape of Armenia is almost non-existent, except for several political parties. The others do not have proper structures or widespread presence throughout Armenia. And it makes it very difficult to create that presence around the country. For that, you need time, you need people, you need devotion, and you need patience. So this is process we're going through. But the mere fact that the movement is still alive, and it's shows that no matter what the presence of the movement in the street is, the movement is there, and it's bringing its force, and it making the government politicians take that into consideration while they are thinking of the actions that they are going to take.
Dziunik, in the light of your statement about consolidation, I do want to also address some of the criticisms that the movement has received, because it has been all over the media for more than a week now. You know probably that I'm going to ask you about what Mikhail Srbazan said about the movement. And just to briefly introduce him, Mikhail Srbazan has been the teacher of Bagrat Srbazan. He has been seen walking and attending the Srbazan's protests, and Bagrat Srbazan has many times himself said that you know they're close friends. So it was a pretty surprising to me that when a journalist asked Mikhail Srbazan what are the reasons for the failure of the protests so far, or the faltering, let's just say, not failure, Mikhail Srbazan said the main reason is the shadow of former presidents Robert Kocharyan and Serzh Sargsyan. This led to, as I say, a whole media circus for about a week. What are your thoughts about the statement of Mikhail Srbazan and the fact that basically Bagrat Srbazan didn't directly address that claim? He merely defended his friend and his ideal and his mentor, I guess, from attacks that he was receiving. Any thoughts that you can add to this discussion?
Well, I have high regard of Mikhail Srbazan, and I know that he and Bagrat Srbazan have been among those few in the church that have been critical of the both Kocharyan and Sargsyan governments. So having criticism coming out from Mikhail Srbazan, it's natural for me to hear it from him. However, I think there is something that probably he overlooked while speaking emotionally at that point, and that is the fact that actually that kind of a discourse is very beneficial to Pashinyan. And that's what he's trying to put through the public discourse in order to keep that present and previous discussion alive, to put that demarcation line between the previous presidents and himself, and that makes it easier for him to manipulate the people. The thing is that nobody can force, or nobody has the right to not allow anyone to be part of the political processes in Armenia. If they are citizens of Armenia, they are allowed to be part of the political processes of Armenia. As for the actual benefit of the two presidents and the so-called their shadow, I think it's, in actuality, it is not to the extent that it is being presented, because there have been many times that for months there was no political movement on the streets and nobody came out and did nothing. So to say that the people have this kind of a preset idea that if the previous presidents are part of a process and they are not going to participate is not the case anymore. We have grown out of that particular mentality. Most of the people in Armenia have grown out of that mentality. And I think it is to Pashinyan's benefit to bring that kind of a concept back into the discussion, which is non-existent anymore. Because for many, it is now very obvious that during those two presidents' time, there were a lot of issues, there was a lot of drawbacks, but there is one thing that nobody can argue. Security of both Artsakh and Armenia was guaranteed, and Armenia and Armenian officials and leadership were always treated with high respect. These two things are gone, and we are facing the risk, the existential actually risk, both for the country and for the people living in the country. And this has never been throughout, I would say, 100 years during the Soviet time and during the independence time. This government has brought it to our doors, has brought this arret to our doors, and this is going to be very tragic if they succeed in what they are doing. So I think Mikhail Serzh was more emotional in reacting, and he is very taking everything very close to his heart, as anybody who has done a lot for this country and for the church and for the presence of Armenians all over the world. And to have the loss of Artsakh is very painful. And I think it is more pain talking through his mouth rather than the thought that he's contributing to the success of the process. So we have to separate these two things, and I think he's whatever he said was more emotional rather than the actual intent of what he was going to contribute for the success of the movement.
Dziunik, Pashinyan and Putin met in Turkmenistan last Friday. This seems to have been scheduled at the last minute ahead of the BRICS meeting in Kazan, where it is anticipated that a new strategic partnership agreement is planned to be signed. Putin said, "Our assessment of current events in the world are very close." He was referring to Russia and Iran. What are the areas that Russia and Iran disagree on?
Well, it is hard to say what are the areas that Russia and Iran disagree on. I think with the current development in the world, they have more in common than they have something that they can disagree on. And whatever they have with the disagreements, if there are any, they can easily work it out, because both the economic projects, they are the North-South one, both understanding that, for example, this so-called Zangezur corridor cannot go to any Western presence or Turkish presence. It has the Armenian state border has to be preserved as such, and no changes in the territorial demarcation of the Armenian-Iranian border has to be there. So it's a common position. Apparently, I would hardly mention anything that right now from major issues that they have disagreement on, be it Syria, be it Palestine, be it overall the Middle Eastern situation, be it South Caucasus, be it Central Asia, or be it the alternative political structure that is being currently created by Russia, China, and Iran working together against the Western dominance. So I think there's more in common than anything that I could come up right now that they would disagree on.
Well, there was some mention in Iranian media about S-400 systems, and that actually brings me to the next question we wanted to ask, because the entire region is bracing for an Israeli attack. And there was a question of the level of support that Russia would give Iran in the case of an all-out major attack. So maybe you could answer, you could give us your thoughts on that, and also on the likelihood of a major attack in the first place. We know that potentially one of the reasons why Israel was delaying its attack could have been related to Yom Kippur, which is one of the holiest Jewish holidays. But yeah, that Yom Kippur came and went. There was also a phone call between Netanyahu and Biden that apparently led to the cancellation of a trip by Gallant to Washington, D.C. So a lot of bidirectional and communications happening or not happening. But what will be in general, what is your assessment of a major attack by Israel, and what will be Azerbaijan's role in case that happens?
Well, a major attack was being planned, but I think the October 1 retaliation by Iran changed those plans, because the result and the damages that it posed was not something that both Israel and the US were imagining that they could have. Now they are, I think, reshuffling the plans, reconsidering their moves, and that's what is happening. The attack will happen. It's a matter of timing. I think it will not happen right, because we're on the 14th. I don't think it will happen before the elections, because it's too dangerous now. The Israeli side has to reconsider its defense systems, and it will take time. So apparently we will see more focus on the Lebanon, Hezbollah, Syria area, and Gaza. And maybe in December, January, we will probably face this big attempt again to drag Iran into direct military actions with Israel. Azerbaijan has a role to play. I have mentioned many times it has to be part of the second front against Iran, and that's where Armenia will be just stepped over from both sides. And of course, Azerbaijan does not want that to happen, not because they like Armenia, but because they want to keep whatever they have gained during this period of time. Russia, I think, is working very closely not to allow Aliyev to go with this adventurous plan. And it's not accidental that with every increase of the tensions on this Middle Eastern front, we see immediately visits from Russian high officials to Baku, kind of explaining their pros and cons in order not to give in to the pressures that are coming from the Western side. So I think overall the plan is now with the Western, especially the US administration, is to kind of use this time before the elections to reconsider all the plans. Meantime, to force Azerbaijan before the COP, because COP is coming immediately, almost immediately after November elections. So to use this time to pressurize Aliyev into signing this so-called whatever document paper that will be presented as peace agreement or semblance of peace agreement, and then create the favorable situation for the second front line to be opened. That's where the Georgian elections come in, and the Georgian elections, I hope, will give winning positions to the current government, which will help us avoid the Georgian part getting into any kind of second front situation, about which they have stated on multiple times.
Can I interject real quick? Because we have heard and we've talked a lot about the parliamentary elections in 2 weeks in Georgia. This is about the ruling party, the Georgian Dream Party, or not the Georgian Dream Party, essentially. They've passed a number of laws that the West doesn't like and has struck a fairly neutral path in foreign affairs throughout the course of this very turbulent geopolitical time in the last 2-3 years. So the West has painted these elections in very dire terms, that they could mean the end of democratic Georgia. What happens if Georgian Dream wins, and what happens if they lose?
Well, I hope Georgian Dream wins, and that would mean more increased sovereignty and more balanced decision-making from the Georgian part. That would mean no second front against Russia. And though I think that the Western centers will do their best to create destabilization in Georgia and have some kind of a second revolution there, but I hope that the Georgian government has learned the lesson and they would stop it from happening, or at least destabilizing the country to the extent that it will be out of control. So it is very important for us to have a very balanced, and when I say for us, it means for Armenia and the Armenian people. I don't mean the government. So it's very beneficial for us to have a very stable Georgia with balanced foreign policy that is creating beneficial conditions for the prosperity of the country.
Dziunik, from our perspective, you know that the Abkhaz Railway is very important. How realistic are these predictions that we're hearing that Russia might try to pry Georgia away from the West by enticing it into a confederation with South Ossetia and Abkhazia?
I don't think South Ossetia or Abkhazia would agree to any kind of confederation. But I think that they would come up with some kind of a agreement allowing the Abkhazian Railway to start operating. This kind of discussions have been going on previously as well. But I think with the current government and also the way that the West displayed itself, it's like a dictatorial element that is saying either you go my way or you don't go anyway. And this kind of positioning opens the Georgian people's eyes towards the true intentions of the Western countries and the Western hegemony. So I think with the current situation, if the Georgian Dream wins and stays in power, of course they will have several probably weeks of relative instability in the country, which will be incited by the Western NGOs and different kind of people that are being thrown into the fire there. But I think that will be beneficial both for Georgia and Georgian people and also for the South Caucasus as a whole. And it will open the door for improvement of relations with Abkhazia and improvement of relations with South Ossetia. In the future, nobody knows what will happen. But at least that will give possibility for solution of certain issues, and economic ties being the first one that will be beneficial for Georgia as well, because they understand now that with the West-East corridor being implemented, they need to have more routes rather than rely only on Lars for the north-south connection.
So let me ask then how a potential GD victory can affect internal politics in Armenia. For instance, it would obviously, I think, make the group of people that are saying, Armenia should join Europe look even more ridiculous than they currently do. But could also, essentially, if Russia has a new additional partner in the South Caucasus in the face of Georgia, could that make Armenian-Russian relations even more strategically, I guess, lopsided? What are your thoughts about the potential, how the GD elections would affect Armenia in general?
Well, I explained that it will be beneficial for Armenia and the Armenian people. For the current government, it will make their positioning even more difficult, because previously, according to the Western plans, the whole South Caucasus was supposed to be put under the Western umbrella with some kind of a European Union-like association structure where they would be the leading partners and the ones that be the decision makers, and we will be the ones following their decisions. But with this kind of situation, of course, they will look more ridiculous with the drive to jump into a wagon that I usually call is going down it has fallen into the gorge, and it is very close to crashing. So we don't have to join anything, and I'm not really confident that the European Union will survive its unity within the next 2-3 years' time. We will have to see, because the economic situation there is becoming worse and worse. The countries are starting slowly to draw back their resources in order to survive. The political situation within the countries is becoming more difficult, and we are seeing more national-oriented parties coming to power, and these national-oriented parties will demand change of foreign policy and change of economic priorities. So we will have to see what becomes of the European Union before we jump into any wagon. And I think this is also what Georgia has seen, because they have gone through all these processes themselves, and they have seen that cutting ties with Russia and jumping into an uncertainty that the European Union brings with a lot of promises and no actual material things being delivered does not bring any good to the country or to the people. So this is, I think, what is happening.
Okay, time for me to ask each of you if there are some personal thoughts you would like to share with our listeners. Dziunik, something on your mind?
Well, I have been watching, actually, I have been listening to the music and to the sounds coming from the Republic Square. My apartment is very close to it. And the thought that crossed my mind is that we are in such a dire situation that we cannot even enjoy any festivities or any celebrations, even if that relates to our capital, to our achievements, they seem so irrelevant now. It is really sad. And I think that the same feeling is with many in Armenia. And the number of the people that are just looking at those that are jumping under the music as if they are from a different world. They have nothing to do with this country, the concerns, the threats, or they're trying to run away from those concerns. So we have a lot to do to bring back joy, which Armenians had in the country, and celebrate it wholeheartedly. This is gone now.
Hovik, what's on your mind?
Well, I fully concur with Dziunik. I think that the official policy of this government is forget what happened in the past, just party. I believe the term "Gerikha Mikefara Sharunak" has been used, and it seems to be for some people either whether they're willingly or it seems to be like an escape from the reality which is dawning upon us. But I would like to stress that listeners, if you care about prisoners of war and hostages in Azerbaijan, please do follow the COP29 hashtag on social media, participate in discussions, like, share, reshare. Make sure that our voice is heard. It's very important. It's the least you can do. Every day, you should wake up and you should move as if what would happen if those hostages were released and asked you, did you do enough so that our leaders, came home sooner? And I think it's the least we can do given the sacrifices that the political and military leadership of Artsakh has done, and anyone, even normal soldiers, have done. And lastly, on this civil contract presentation that I just talked about previously, where Armen Grigoryan said you should eat rice, I mean, it's just astounding that such a high-level presentation is being hosted by civil contract and not the government of Armenia. And everyone from the West was there, including this foreign-funded NGOs and foreign-funded agents of influence in Armenia. So my question is, where does civil contract end and the government of Armenia begin?
All right. Let's leave it there for today. Thank you, Dziunik, for joining us.
Thank you, Aspe. Thank you, Hovik. Good night.
Thank you, Dziunik-Jan.
That was our Week in Review show, recorded on October 14, 2024. We've been talking with Ambassador Dziunik Aghajanian, who has served Armenia through the ranks of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and most recently as a diplomat, as Armenia's ambassador to such countries as the Netherlands, Malaysia, and Indonesia. She received her education at Yerevan State University, Columbia University in New York, and Uppsala University in Sweden. For more on the participants in this episode, please visit our show notes at podcast.groong.org/episode number.